Not. Okay. So then let's start. Thank you very much for coming. I was recently in a workshop done by Safe Software and by FME, speaking about data transformation process, and they were showing from a perspective of a proprietary data provider how the transformation of legacy data sets towards Inspire, including publishing as Inspire service, should be done. And actually this presentation from the colleagues before was very interesting because it showed and partly or mostly left open most of the problems we are addressing here, because what we would like to show you now is a practice example where we try to, or where we are harmonizing a European-wide data set and to provide Inspire conformant data set based on that. So the workshop is divided in two major parts. I have the honor to chair and to introduce you to the strange acronym of Cdda. Furthermore, my colleagues Daya Lietenegger and Maria, I have problems pronouncing the last name. Maybe you can help. You will do that later. I'm sorry. Will contribute to the main part, and we will have discussion on the outcomes, including how this project contributes to the Inspire maintenance and implementation group. So, just as a short introduction, who of you knows what Cdda, the acronym, stands for? So I see the audience is pretty blank. We have one hand rising. Perfect. If I remember correctly, it's the common database on designated areas. What are designated areas? Designated areas in the context of this data set are areas which are under national legislation foreseen as environmental protection areas. So here we have to distinguish between the European legislation, which is, for example, Natura 2000, and the national one. So Cdda is a priority data flow, which was established in 1995 and came out from the inventory under CORIN program. And in this priority data flow, we have a range of countries participating. So here we agreed on the way and on the frequency, on the content of the data they are delivering to us. Us is the EA. And as you can see here, we have until now, in the latest version, the version 11, sorry, I'm Swedish, the version 11, 30 countries participating with tabular data, which you can see in pink on the left side, and 31 participating with actually spatial data. And the spatial data is that what we are especially interested in. So I introduced already that this is a part of the 16 IONET priority data flows. The priority data flows already mentioned are data flows, in some cases also already reporting data flows, where we have a bilateral or we have multilateral agreements with the countries delivering this data on the content, on the structure, on the frequency, and on the quality of the data. And here on the map, it's a bit small, but you can check it also on the IONET webpage. You see the countries who are participating. So it goes beyond the actual European Union. It includes the countries of the Western Balkans. It includes the EFTA countries as well as Turkey. So what we do with the priority data flows, we are kind of scoring them. So we are evaluating the data we get according to the timeliness, according to the content. So was the content right? Did we get it in the right frequency? And here you see that the majority of the countries got pretty high scores in terms of their quality. Speaking about Cdda, also it's important to give you an impression about the size of the data set. So we are speaking of a pan-European data set. So we are getting the national contributions from all the member states, as you saw. And we are bringing them together in a European-wide data set. So here, for the tabular and for the spatial versions, in version 11, we are speaking about above 90,000 features. Yeah, what is EEA doing actually with Cdda? Not only EEA. So we are using the Cdda dataset as it is European-wide in the EEA internal spatial data infrastructure, which is not that important for you. But you can also access the data, download the data, use the data, because it's available under EEA data and maps. So actually available to everybody. It is also contributing to the OINIS classification. It is part of several Natura 4000 viewers, and it is part of protected planning and the WDPA program of the United Nations. Just also to give you what is the role of Cdda, for example, internally. For us, Cdda is a core data set, so the CSI 008 is dealing with the designated areas. So we are using this to build our indicators, our environmental indicators, which we share with you. Also our policies, our policy support, which is based on the assessment, uses Cdda data. So furthermore, if you look for more information, please check the EA website. So you can find guidance reference material. Yes, you will have the presentation afterwards. You can also look at the link. And here you see a link repository where you can get more information. But the scope of this workshop is not to introduce Cdda. It is similar, just to build a bridge for you. Our scope is to harmonize the datasets we got under Cdda into an Inspire harmonized European-wide dataset. And this is what the following presentations are about. So as next, I would invite my colleague Dai, who is also the project leader, and ask me to chair this session.
Thank you very much. So I will continue with presentation to present you a few information about our project, what is this scope, objective and expected outcomes. I will also present you what we mean by a transformation workflow, which is a long process which provides you possibility to evaluate and transform the data into the exchange format required by Inspire, and I will present you a little bit more on the I will present you one step of this workflow, which is called conceptual mapping. So this project is initiated, financed, and also led by the European Environment Agency. It was designed in September 2013, and the expected outcome will be 2014. It's a one-year project, establishing a prototype to evaluate this transformation workflow. The composition of the project combines different types of knowledges, in particular the knowledge of the thematic domain of the Cdda, the information technology, GIS, Geographic Information Systems, and also Inspire. It includes the experts from the EEA, the experts from the European Topic Center on Biological Diversity, and we jointly developed this with our external consultant, Tracasa. Of course, what we plan after the end of this project, this is not the complete EEA and IONET network involvement. We plan to present this project to our wider audience, to IONET, and to design further steps together with IONET based on the outcomes of this project. So our starting point is the so-called common database on designated areas, the pan-European European inventory, which is very closely related to the Inspire Spatial Data Team protected sites. which defines the areas, the protected sites, as those areas which are designated or managed within a framework of international community and member states legislation to achieve specific conservation objectives. And this point that this is under some sort of legal instruments, national legal instruments, is a common point in Cdda and in the INSPIRE protected sites. Here I would like to inform you that recently the INSPIRE protected sites technical guidelines was updated, and please check their website and use the latest version uploaded in April 2014. So the project scope is to evaluate the existing European Cdda dataset and with the INSPIRE protected site simple application schema, to design the transformation workflow and to use this transformation workflow in all steps of the projects to provide the final results. One of the final results will be the transformed European Cdda datasets into GML. This is the exchange format recommended by INSPIRE, to provide approach to the validation of the GML files, and to also identify any open issues that we might encounter through the whole project, through the whole transformation workflow. And based on this, maybe to prepare certain proposals for updates if this will be necessary and applicable. The outcomes, therefore, included the initial study, evaluation study, how to deal with this project, the model for the transformation workflow, the mapping rules, the conceptual mapping rules between two data models, the proof of concepts for the transformation into GML, the transformed GML files, the report on validation, and the open issues. And all these deliverables will be available on our website. If they are not available right now, they will be available soon. So the Cdda data flow is not changed. It exists as it is, which means that the countries provide their contributions based on the deadlines established together with IONET and the countries, based on the Cdda data model, which is already defined, and other guidelines which are established for this data flow. As one of the outputs, the European dataset is integrated from all the countries' contributions, and these existing datasets are actually used in this project. What we are looking in the project is how to do the conceptual level, what kind of processes we have to run to make this transformation, and what kind of data we are using. And you will see that we have to consider the complete Cdda data model. However, we found out that only a subset of this data model could be used for further comparison with the INSPIRE protected sites data model. In the process, we have to go from analysis to transformation and validation to transform the input source data, which is the European data set of the Cdda, into the corresponding GML files. So now let's look into our transformation workflow. So the basis for this transformation could be found in INSPIRE Directive Article 7.3, saying that the spatial data set shall be made available in conformity with the implementing rules, either through the adaptation of the existing spatial data sets or through the transformation service, which is described as one of the INSPIRE network services. In principle, the transformation workflow has to be generic and applicable to any spatial data set that will be needed to be transformed with regard to the required data specifications. In the case of our project, this transformation workflow is our guidelines, our red line, how to present the way, how to transform the existing European Cdda data set with regard to the INSPIRE protected sites. The project was, this transformation workflow was designed with great help of Tracasa, and as you can see, it is specified in 6 steps. Not all of them are not necessarily sequential. Some of them could be run in parallel or in combination. But the initial 2 steps could be maybe combined. They present the initial feasibility study of the transformation, identification of input data source and output data source, the data models, and input data source as well. As a step 2 is described here that in the case you don't have a data model related to the input data source, you might even develop one. So this is this type of identification of source and target data models. It is part of the step, let's say, first and second step of this workflow. The next step is the step 3 in this diagram, is the conceptual mapping, which actually presents really the evaluation between two data models, but going not only going down from the general for the high-level evaluation down to the latest detail of both data models. And what is extremely important is to properly document these mapping rules, because this will be used in the step 4, which is then data transformation into GML. In the step 4 with the data transformation, it might be very wise to use some initial validation of this GML, because this will save a little bit the time that you don't do the complete validation at the end, but you use already some sort of validation in this step of data transformation, maybe on test data, to have the first feedback that you are on the right track. However, validation is a very complex step, and it will require much more additional work. As the last step of this workflow is a pure publication of GML files, which could be published as files on a website, or maybe later on used through the services to serve the different users. Now, I would like to share with you a little bit of our experiences. Our project is not completed yet, so we already evaluated step 4, and we are preparing step 5. And based on certain information from step 5, we will complete step 4 in the following days. So we are between step 4 and 5 in our project. However, what we found is that there are different levels of complexity, and also we spent different amount of time for different steps. The first step in our project was relatively straightforward. We identified both data models, the input, the target data model. Both specifications are developed and very well documented, and there was no need to redevelop any new data model for this purpose. So let's say that this level of complexity was relatively low, easy, and we estimated we spent around 10% of time of what is estimated for the complete project. Now, the step 3, conceptual mapping, is demanding, because it requires the content discussions from the Cdda and from the Inspire point of view, and you have to consider all the details which are included in both data models. You have to develop use certain tools with which you will present the mapping between input data model and target data model, so-called matching table. You have to document all the details. And it is also smart to do some sort of data evaluation, how your real data fits with these matching rules. So the next step, step 4, is evaluated as a medium, because it requires the selection of software tools for the transformation into GML. It might require that the data will be prepared in a certain way that your software tools could read the data and then transform them. It will require some initial testing and some comparison with the validation tests. So it is not that straightforward. It is a little bit more complex, requires more tools. But once the mapping rules are done, which are the input into this data transformation, and you have transformation rules encoded in your software, this is some sort of routine computer processing at the end. So that's why we evaluate this as a 15% of time. Depends, of course, also on the complexity of data and the size of the database. But in our project, we evaluated this way. With step 5, we are facing actually some level of uncertainties, because it's not completely clear how to execute the test. We have the abstract test suites in the Inspire protected sites, but we don't know exactly how to do them. What are the tools that I can use to run the tests? What is the right evaluating approach? How I will interpret the results of these tests? And what we can do in this project will be to evaluate the approach to the testing and to make a small subset of selective testing for the project only. Now, when this will be a question of this is the evaluation of complete conformity of the data set to Inspire, this will mean run all the tests. For our project, we will have to do a selective testing here. And this step is extremely complex because of these high uncertainties and not completely known software tools to use, sometimes giving different results. And that's why we established this as 30% of the time of the project needed to set up the proper testing environment and to run the tests. And as last point, which should be relatively easy, is to publish the provided GML results in a certain way and with certain means. Now, step 3 of our transformation workflow is conceptual mapping. This is the place where the content is discussed and where the content has to be completely clear. So our focus was to fulfill the complete Inspire protected site simple application schema, including all the avoidable elements. The questions that we had to answer was, are the concepts in both data models and specifications behind the same, or they are different? Do I have any gaps, and how to fulfill the gaps? Which spatial objects, attributes, and data formats I can actually map, and how to do this? Do I still have the Cdda purpose if I transform my data into the Inspire protected sites? I have to keep my purpose. So this is one of the very, very important questions. Yes, and as I said before, check always the mapping rules with the real data from Cdda. You will find that in some cases you don't have data and you need to answer what will you do, what Inspire requires to do in the cases where you don't have data in your database. So now let's go to our data models. Inspire Cdda data model is a set of interrelated tables with different properties. It's a more type of entity relationship data model, and it includes only the tabular data. So the geometric properties, geometry, GIS part, spatial part is provided in another separate data set. When we evaluated this big data model, we found out, we identified those tables and attributes that from the first perspective actually could be mapped, are required by the Inspire protected sites. You can see that we are from now on talking only about the subset of the data model. Now, from the Inspire protected sites data model perspective, first, the simple application schema provides a limited set of fundamental attributes with geometry, Inspire identifier, name of the protected sites, information about the legal documents, the designation type, and so on. So from the Inspire protected sites, what you can see here, that some of the types are modeled in a more complex way, like designation type. So even the attributes here, you have to always expand and to look into all types, data types, which are defined in the data model. Now, I would like to present you our experiences when we were doing this conceptual mapping. We found out, let's say two groups of properties. One for which the mapping was quite straightforward, and for ones where we struggled a little bit more to find the correct interpretation and the way how to do the mapping. But let's go through in the sequential order through this mapping. So with geometry, we didn't find any problems. In the Cdda includes polygons, which are provided as polygons or multi-polygons, and from this point of view, there are no difficulties with the GM object type in Inspire protected sites. With the Inspire ID is another complex data type which requires 2 or 3 attributes. The 2 mandatory ones, the local ID, which is the unique ID within the namespace, and the namespace is the attribute which provides you information about the data provider or the thematic domain within which this data set is set up. What we found in the Cdda, we found several attributes that might fulfill this requirement of to have identifier which is unique, persistent, it cannot be repeated, and it has to be generated and available. So when we were trying to model this into the complex type of identifier, we found out that we have one attribute which is called site code, which fits perfectly into the local ID. It is unique, And it is also the external identifier which is used to have unique records in the world database of protected areas. So this attribute is extremely important because it gives the uniqueness within the European database and within the global database. So we designed that this site code is a candidate to have a local ID. For namespace, we have to find a solution because the namespace as such was not possible to generate directly from the Cdda. But for the purpose of this project, we provide a formula to generate the namespace from the name of the EU level protected sites as a type of Inspire team and the Cdda as a type of the product with the information from which country this data is provided. Now we are aware that this might probably change. This is for the purpose of the project. We have to have Inspire ID, and this was the proposal how to generate it. When the countries will start to implement Inspire protected sites, they might design their own ID, and in theory this ID could be just taken over, not a redesign. So another relatively straightforward mapping is the legal foundation date, which requires the date when the date when the protected site was created. And we have a very similar attribute in Cdda, year, saying where the year when the protected site was established, was the first time designated, sorry. What is necessary to be aware here is that you provide the proper format because Inspire requires the ISO format date time, which has a specific encoding, and you have to transform your value of year into this format. Legal foundation document is another important element because it provides the legal basis, the legal act, the legal document which it creates the protected sites. In Inspire, this is another ISO type called CI citation. And in Cdda, we have a legal act information as well, but in that case, legal acts are not related to individual site, to the creation of individual site, but to the designation. And here we found actually a big difference between the Cdda and the legal acts following designation, establishment of designation, and the Inspire protected sites asking for the reference to legal documentation, which creates the protected site. So we decided that for the European Cdda, this mapping is not appropriate, it's not possible, because it will alter the meaning of the legislation used in both databases. And we decided to provide this attribute as voidable. However, it could be that this information exists in the databases of national data providers or regionals, and they could give this information. But it's not required in the Cdda. Our next attribute is site designation, probably the core element which provides you what is the designation type of this protected site. And as you can see, again, it is a complex type where you have to provide the designation scheme, the appropriate code type of this designation scheme, but also the percentage under the designation, the percentage of the site under the designation of this site. What we found in our investigations is actually that what is currently in the protected sites code list are the designations which are more oriented towards the international types of designations, and protected sites allows to extend this designation scheme with the national designation types. And this is exactly what we propose here, because keeping the information about the designation categories in the Cdda is extremely important. And this should be connected together with the model of the Inspire protected sites. In that case, we propose to extend this code list with two new designation schemes called National Designation Type Category and National Designation Type Code. And both of these values for both of these schemes already exist in the Cdda. The third scheme which can be used together, in this case Cdda Inspire, is the IUCN categories, because those categories are already included in the Cdda. What we found a little bit the difference is maybe a little bit different understanding that the IUCN categories are more categories of the management categories, which are established for the protection purposes of this protected site. However, and not pure designation schemes, but this is something maybe to have more, again, another content discussion. So these three schemes are now proposed to be used. IUCN, directly from the protected sites, and two extensions which will bring the Cdda designation categories together with the INSPIRE protected sites. With the percentage under designation, it looks as a small attribute, but we don't have this information directly in the Cdda database. However, we decided that from the meaning of the Cdda database, we can provide these values as default values because the Cdda includes only those protected sites which are under 100% of designation. So that's why we propose to use, in the case of the categories, National Designation Type category and National Designation Type code, this value will be 100%. And in the case of IUCN categories, sometimes we don't have this information. That's why we were a little bit in a dilemma, how to fulfill INSPIRE protected sites definition, saying if the value is not provided, it is assumed to be 100%, but I don't know actually. So here we proposed a little bit of workaround to use the default value of -1 to indicate that this data, this information is actually not present in the Cdda. So, site name is again straightforward. We have site name, we have the name of the protected site in Cdda, it is in INSPIRE protected sites. What it is here important is that when you encode this name, you have to follow the complete data type, which is in the INSPIRE protected sites called geographical name. And here you can see the data type geographical name. And the last attribute, this attribute which is required from INSPIRE protected site again is not in part of the database in the Cdda. However, from the meaning of the Cdda, we can provide a default value for all the records of the Cdda, which is actually nature conservation. This fits completely well with the purpose of the Cdda. So, if I make a summary, this is our model, which will be used for further transformation of data. You can see, based on the INSPIRE protected sites, you can see that we can fulfill almost all we can provide data for almost all the attributes, with this exception of the legal foundation document, which I tried to explain why we can't map to this, and with two additional proposed schemas and the code list. And with this type of minimum extended data model, I think that we can really provide a very good information about the national designations on the level of the INSPIRE protected sites data model. So maybe just a short word to what voidable, what I mentioned. So you have seen in the INSPIRE protected sites data model, some attributes are mentioned as voidable. This is defined in the implementing rule as the voidable are those values, those characteristics where the exact value is actually not available in the database, or it would be too costly to generate this value out of the existing data. In that case, you declare your attribute voidable. However, you have to provide also the reason that this attribute is voidable. And in INSPIRE, not only protected sites, but in INSPIRE framework documents and in the complete documentation, we found actually two types how to present voidable characteristics. One, it is the INSPIRE code list, and the other one arises directly from the GML encoding from ISO standard 19136, which again provides the voidable reasons. Both code lists could be extended with different purposes, but what is currently presented here fulfills the implementation needs currently. And we also found out that when you have in your data model an attribute which is a data type of ISO, the ISO nil reason is expected. So this might be something to discuss further on. So let's conclude. Yes, we found some open issues. The first one was, the biggest one was these two different concepts about the legal documents which are used in Inspire and the Inspire protected sites, for which we decided that the difference is too big and we cannot map them. Then we struggled again with the attribute percentage of protected sites under a designation, but I think that in the future this could be solved probably easier. And what we found also important is that more clear guidelines are actually needed when we work with voidable elements. It takes a lot of time to find out all the details and to find the proper way what you need to provide if your attribute is voidable. So, main lessons learned. It's extremely important to involve the experts from the thematic domains in the conceptual modeling. Now we are talking about the conceptual modeling only. It's also time demanding, so please don't underestimate this time in your transformation workflow. Don't force the mapping if you see that the concepts are too different. Maybe with the time, with more data more available, you will find better solutions than forcing the mapping and maybe changing the meaning of the original data set which will be provided, which will be exchanged based on the Inspire data models. So, some very positive things. We think that Cdda data models is highly compatible with Inspire. That is actually excellent. So it is recommended to keep the purpose of the initial database, data source, and also to provide, in this case of Cdda, European Cdda, to provide this minimum extension to Inspire protected sites, which allow to include information about the national designation categories into this data model, and exchange file. And what is important, all the code lists that we propose here in this extended model are already available. They are regularly provided by the member states. So I will close my presentation here. Thank you.
Yeah, I would propose to take questions at the end, and just to continue with Maria. If you can take another 30 minutes, so then we have 20 minutes.
Okay, I will try. Let's see. Okay, I have to go from the more theoretical, more conceptual mapping to the practical issue. How we have done, or how we have been working on this transformation. My name that he was not able to pronounce is Cabello in Spanish, and we try to present outside. I have to say Cabello because it's quite easily understandable. So I work in the company Tracasa, and as Darja mentioned before, we are supporting them in this project of the making Cdda conforming Inspire. I will try to follow more or less those steps. So just to go on the data transformation, the GML issues, something about validation and testing, tools we have been using during this project, and finally a very short about the still open issues and lesson learned, just to complete from the practical perspective those that has been already mentioned by Darja. So let's go from conceptual to practical. The first thing, this morning 2 workshops, and both of them talking about the matching table. I think that this is something that we already know, and for us has been really very, very useful for mapping this correspondence, these relationships on the both the data source and the data model, target data model. So for this purpose, we agree with all the people that matching table is fundamental, just to have the first overview on what's happening from my data to be part of Inspire data model. And about the transformation, we also have to take in consideration some other aspects. The first of them is the format. In which format are my data? In this case, as Daria mentioned before, it was 2 different files. One of them just only with a table with alphanumeric information, and in the other shape, all the geographical information. Starting from this point, it's clear that we have to move, combine, and go ahead just to perform the transformation and obtain the final GML that is our main objective. Of course, the data model in this case is something that was very clear. Cdda had already a very clear data model, and we also know about the INSPIRE protected size data model. And another aspect that for us has been also just a very good time for discussion about the coordinate reference system, because in principle not all the countries are providing in the same reference system, but in this case all the Cdda is provided in the same coordinate reference system. So for us was simple, but in the case that all the information, so this was one step that EA team was did before, but in some other cases we have also to consider this aspect. So what we would like to ask for the tools requirement, what could be the most important things? So to be able to change the data model, this is clear for a transformation tool, but something that can facilitate very much this transformation is that the tool we finally choose could be able to read those XSD schemas provided by INSPIRE. So this is something that I think that almost all the tools are on this way. So all of them are reading these schemas. So it's something that in the past was all the people asking, and now is there. So this is something that is clear. But also this kind of user utilities. So helping the user about find how to choose the right information for doing the transformation. Of course, for coordinate reference system, just something that could transform, a tool that could transform the coordinates. And finally, to change the format to be able to write in a GML proper encoding according to INSPIRE, so the version that the INSPIRE is asking. And this is what we would like to ask to the tools, and I have to say that now the 2 workshops this morning and the other tool that we have been working in the project, almost all of them are doing all these kind of things. So they are fulfilling now the requirements for just doing the transformation, more or less details. So moving to the GML, what we face is how to encode the different elements. And what we have found is that there are different ways to encode the elements. In some of them, as Daria already mentioned, is a direct link, direct relationships from my source to the target data model. In some others, we have to create some logical conditions. If the data is 1, then you have to put this. Or value combinations that we also have used, and enumeration lists that are already provided in INSPIRE are already provided in the schemas, so it's quite easy just to choose which of these values is the most appropriate. And also, as mentioned Daria, I'm not going to go into detail, but we have to be clear which kind of voidable reasons we should include, if it's INSPIRE or it's ISO. So in this case, those are the main issues. And I'm just trying to follow the same schema that Darja has been presenting. So just going into detail one by one of all the attributes. For the first, the geometry, as she mentioned before, we decided to go on only with the polygons, because in the Cdda there are also some points, but we decided to skip the points and use only the polygons. And this is the case, but also for the geometry, we have in mind the coordinate reference system as part of the geometry, and in this sense, after reviewing, well, we have decided to choose this way of encoding the coordinate reference system. This is the ops. I can see, I don't know if you at the end could see, but only in this case, this is representing the GML encoding, just detailing that it's geometry, starting and end, and in this case, the way of creating a multi-polygon, well, has been used composite surface. We still have some discussion, open discussion on this, and how could be better to encode the multi-polygons. It's not a problem, but it's still something that we are discussing, what could be the best way for encoding. And this will be the way we can see one of the two polygons. So, as I mentioned, it's open, but it's under discussion on how to encode. For the Inspire ID, as was also presented before, two main elements. I have tried to put here the matching table. So for every element there is just a copy of this part of the matching table, and in this case two main attributes, local ID and namespace. The first is a direct link, as has been mentioned before, and the namespace has been created by combination. I have here two different encoding, only to underline why we use this final ISO, because in this case, when the country is only one country inside Europe, we don't really have any problem, so it's duplicated, the parent ISO and the ISO 3. But in the case when there are some overseas territories, that is the case of Norway, we have to, at this point, from the Cdda perspective, to just discriminate where exactly is the information coming. As you mentioned, probably in the future, if the information is provided by the data provider, this doesn't make sense at all. But now it was discussed also, and finally we reached this kind of agreement. For the legal foundation date, as we have seen already, there is an attribute in the Cdda that is GIA, but this GIA has another different format that the format required under Inspire specification. And this is the case. GR in Cdda is only GR, but in Inspire GR date and time. So we reached also for this purpose an agreement just to consider the first day, the first month of the year, and the date 00, so and the first second. So, and this is the way we have built this attribute. You can see here, this is what we combine, GIA plus all this information. About the legal foundation document, as Darja mentioned before, we decided to go on the voidable reasons because it doesn't really fit with the information that is in the Cdda. So this will be the easiest way to encode this element, this attribute. However, this information can be also available on the data provider level, and we make the exercise just try to see how this information could be encoded from the data provider perspective. And this is what I find, the two attributes that should be completed in a mandatory way, and this is the way on how the two attributes could be encoded. Those are different ways of, it's not one, but different ways of encoding. Can be regulation, internal regulation, local or regional regulation, but is focused on the site regulation. And this is really important because it's site regulation. And on the attribute date, in this case, the date is easier because can be used only as year. So the way to build another attribute, another encoding with date, in this case only with the date will be enough. But in this case, that is Cdda, I think that I have another, okay. Also should be included the information about the code list and code list value. That what means that you have to know which kind of date you are providing. In this case is creation, but can be also some modification. And you have also to link to the code list, so to the URI or URL in which this information can be found on the original level. So it's more complicated, but on the data provider level it's easy to know if it exists or not and can be included in the GML encoding. Site designation. Here we face the situation that Darja was mentioned. For the attribute site designation, we have three attributes: the designation, schema designation, and percentage under designation. And we decided to go to complete with the three designations, schemas. So for this purpose, on the matching table, we also open three different lines for every schema. Okay, so the first is the EUCN, the second is the designation code, and the third is the designation category. And this will be how to encode finally our three designations. So you can see the first in red, national designation, national designation type code, national designation type category, and the IUCN, and the three attributes that we can find are now presented. So for every of them we can include this information. This is the designation category, no, this is the designation, and finally the percentage. Remember that this is -1, it's not really available on, it's not possible in principle to encode in this way, but it was the only way we finally found, and this is something that we have shared with the MIG. Just try to find a solution and try to reach an agreement on how could be the best way to encode this one. The same in this case. All these designations, site designation, should include the code space that is the link, the URI, to the designation schema, and also the URI to the designation. And this is something that should be there. It's what Darja mentioned before. On IUCN is something that is in the INSPIRE registry, is included, but the other two are on the data dictionary of the IONET. Okay? About the site name is another topic. as was mentioned, must follow the geographical name structure. So in principle, only the elements on a spelling of name should be enough for encoding this GML. But when we tried to validate this encoding, we received some errors from the validation tools. Therefore, as we understand, and this is something that could be also evaluated, is that even that we could encode in an easier way, we should include, or we must include, let me say, all the different elements, even they are not mandatories. In all these cases, the nil reason should be unpopulated. It's information that we don't really have and is on the inspired data model. But this encoding is completely validated for with different tools. Regarding the site protection classification, this is very easy. This is a enumeration list. You can choose, and we decided previously that all of them were going to have this natural conservation, so no problem with this encoding. Is an element that has been very the easier to decide. And I have included here another element that is not really part of the inspired data model, but is on the GML encoding. When you create a GML, there are an attribute that is ID, only ID, and this attribute is not taking part on the data model, on the inspired data model, but should be in our encoding. This is something that by default all the tools can include, but you can see that depending on the tool, the encoding is completely different. For us, the unique interest is their uniqueness. Only one has to be a unique code, and in this case built with different perspective, but at the end Unix, all of them. Another aspect that we try to include is, apart from the matching table in which we can see which kind of how to fill this, how to match this element with the other, we include some examples. What we have found during our analysis of the Cdda. And the first example is when we have found that all information is available on the Cdda. In this case, it's quite easy to encode and to transform. But some other examples when some of the information was not available on the Cdda. And this make you try to understand how we can solve the different problems that are appearing during the transformation and the mapping. In this case, for example, the legal foundation date, the year, only appears for one of the examples, but not in the other. So the reason definitely was unpopulated. In other case, the designation that doesn't appear, the IUCN in some other cases, and linked to this, neither the code list appear for this when encoding. For the validation and testing, that I think that until now is something that we have been just doing during the last months, from the last year. I think that everyone has evolved very, very much, and now is able to do this kind of transformation. But now I think it's time for the validation. The validation could be very simple, just trying to review if the code is is more or less complete or right, and this could be done with a XML editor that you can download for free, so it's not difficult to find these kind of things. And only with a simple visualization you can see if you have the right geometry or you have the right coordinate reference system, see the information is presented where it's supposed to be. Well, this is a very basic validation. But going more advanced validation is just try to follow the abstracted suite. It's not easy. It's not easy, or not really easy to do that. When we try to interpret, we can interpret it in a different way, the test that are proposing, but in any case, we think that templates for documenting all this process could be very useful. From the perspective of this project is clear, because one of the main outcomes is just to share this information. So we will try also to document all the validation and try to see how can be solved. But we have performed an analysis about the abstracted suite. And this is the table that try to summarize. I'm not going to go into the detail because we are still on the theoretical perspective, but I have to say that those are the different aspects that are included in the abstracted suite, and those are the different tests that should be done. In the second part of the table, we try to put in an easy way how this test could be performed, how could be done. On the first part, you can see we have included 5 different ways. The first is just doing just comparing against, for example, the first one against the XSD protected size. This is quite easy. I think that several tools already are doing that. In this case, XSD extended schema is for the purpose of this project, because we propose to extend the schema with the designation, new designation schema. So this is the reason why it's divided in 2 different columns. The third one will be specific schemas. Those schemas, from our perspective, should be related to those aspects, even that is a specific schema, but is related to those aspects that are general for all the themes. So those are based mainly on the reference system coordinate conformance class, so related to the datum coordinate reference system test. So this is something that is common for all the themes in Inspire. And if it's not created, so I'm asking here if some of you have already done something about these issues to be able to share. So it's something that it could be created once and used for all the themes, just working with validation. And finally, some other aspects of validating that are more not on the transformation, but on the analysis and conceptual mapping that we are doing. So maybe related to the representation of the geometry, or in this case, the version consistency test. This is something that for us was very easy, because we know that we are working only with the version 11 of the Cdda. But in the cases that are different versions, this is something that could be done, but on the data provider level, this kind of test. So this is the way trying to summarize. It's open to discussion. I don't know if information on how we have understand this test will be also available, I suppose, when finished in this case. But I think that now is the time for just confirming the quality of the data we are providing, and this is the how it could be done. So the tools used for the mapping, matching table, it's quite easy. For the transformation, we have been using 2 different tools. Both of them are free or an open source. The first one of them, GeoConverter, is developed by my company, Tracasa, and the second one is Hail, that is open source, and they are also evolving with the people. We are collaborating also with them, just trying to improve the tool as much as possible. The validation, for the validation, we have based mainly on the abstracted suite of Inspire. The idea we have used some extended or specific schemas, but are not completed, are a small piece of the all validation. Also some schematron that we had from the past, that this will be used mainly for the GML, proper GML encoding according the ISO. And it exists, has been used previously in some other projects, and we have been using also for this purpose. And two softwares that we have on trial. One of them is Oxygen XML editor and XML Spy editor from Altova. So those tools are the main we have used for the validation, and of course the templates. So still open issues has been mentioned, but just trying to summarize about the geometry, about the legal foundation document, and about the percentage and the designation. The 3 of them has been shared with Inspire Mix, and we are looking just for an agreement and how could be the best way. Are open, we have made decision on how to encode, but still consider that could be changed if we can reach an agreement. And the lesson learned, definitely, I fully agree, thematic experts are absolutely needed. This cannot be done for a person that is has no knowledge about the theme. This is clear. I think that we now have this more realistic approach on how moving from the conceptual mapping to the GML encoding. I hope that this workshop could be also useful for you. Share information definitely is also a key aspect, and this means that close collaboration among different stakeholders, thematic experts on GML, experts on transformation could reinforce your better transformation. And mention that this right encoding is supposed that will be managed in the next few months by this MEC group. And in this sense, probably we can go back and try to change according to the final agreements. And just underlining that now is the main issue for, we consider that is the quality and validation. And I think that is the time for these aspects. The previous one are more or less solved. We know how to do it, we know how we have done, and now we need just to provide this information on a good quality validated. Thank you very much. I don't know if I'm on time or not. Or...
Oh, you are on time. Perfect.
Thank you.
Very much, both of you, for your yes.
No, I see.
Now some questions. As we are both from EEA, it would be very silly if I asked prepared questions to Dia, so I fully rely on the audience to ask questions. Yeah. Well, I will not give you the microphone, so just speak loud enough.
Okay. Yeah, Maria, you stressed very much that it's important to have a thematic person. How was the practical arrangements for that? Did you physically sit together, the thematic person with the technical person, or could you
Maybe you can also answer.
You can answer as well. It's okay.
So, well, in this case, the thematic expert has been people from the Cdda. So those just really dealing with this data and taking care of the data and all this information. We have experience with at national level or regional level, and we also, the people that is in charge of this information are the thematic experts we need, because they know perfectly how the information is created, how is the data model and things like that. From the technical perspective, in some cases we need to interpret what the thematic expert is just trying to explain, and this in some cases could be difficult, but I think that just being very close is easier. So they have some. They don't really know about probably all the information that Inspire is asking for, but definitely we are there for trying to explain how they should interpret it. I don't know if you would like to add.
So yes, we were sitting together. So we organized different physical meetings where we discussed these issues. We were using all the materials, data models, data from the databases, interpreting and discussing topics, and we were using other web conferences to continue this type of work, very specific questions. What I have to mention here, we were really working with the experts related to the Cdda, but to the European Cdda, and this is the difference, because the Cdda is actually probably an extract from the national databases, which are set up for different, bigger purposes, and Cdda is only one. It is agreed, so we know what the countries provide to us, but they probably have much more information, and we didn't discuss this with those experts from the countries. This is our next step to do, because we wanted to have first some sort of material, experiences, and then to further discuss with them and to see what are the experience in the countries trying to implement national databases, not really Cdda, but national databases as Inspire protected site.
Any further questions?
Yes.
If there's no other question,
Please.
I have to say something.
Yes.
I'm really, really unhappy with all this situation that you described. I have to introduce myself. My name is Dirk Hinterlang. I was member of the thematic. You want? I'm very. I can speak up though.
No, but this is
For the recording, okay. So again, my name is Dirk Hinterlang, and I was a member of the thematic working group Protected Sites, and I'm responsible for protected sites in one state in Germany, so I can say I'm a domain expert just the same, not so much an IT expert, I would even say. I'm very unhappy with this whole situation because as I knew right from the beginning, there are some intellectual traps in this data specification that we finally created, and after I had the fun of doing some more data specification on the Annex 3 themes connected with protected sites, I know exactly what we did wrong in those days and what was maybe from the designing point of view and the data model correct, but would not be understood correctly. And you fell into this trap. That's simply the thing I saw. I want to pick up one or two things which I want to explain. For example, you have the problem with this IUCN category of designated sites. It was meant to be an attribute. It was meant to be an attribute to a category. For example, you have a national park, and a national park in the UK may be IUCN category 4, and in Germany maybe 50% IUCN category management category 1, and the rest is 4, for example, or 75% or something like that. So the whole idea was to have these IUCN categories to be able, it was an idea of harmonization, to be able to compare a protected site in the UK to a protected site in Germany, which is called the same, saying national park. In German it's Nationalpark. You would not know the difference from the word. You would not know the difference from the categories that the Cdda used, like DE01, which is for national park in Germany, and it must be UK 01. So you will not understand what you cannot harmonize the idea. So the main idea of this IUCN category was to have an attribute saying under which management type referring to the IUCN categories this site is managed under. So it doesn't make any sense at all to have a designation type IUCN coding. And that's what I said way back when. I said people will not understand this. Although from the modeling point of view it was correct. We checked it twice or thrice even, and they say no, it's a correct modeling. And I said it will not be understood. So if you read the text closely, it said several times that it should be done the way I now explained it once again. So this is one point, and I would really love to update the data model in this point to get rid of these of this IUCN category idea that's prevailing the whole discussion. To be sure, we were perfectly aware that in almost no member state you would have any data on the IUCN category concerning to referring to a site directly. So we were aware, and it was sort of claiming that member states should, for harmonization, from the harmonization point of view, add information to their protected, to their designated sites, which say what kind of management this site is under. And for example, in my responsibility, I already added all those information to the protected sites in North Rhine-Westphalia. And by the way, you can see those data as DML for several years now as a download service in North Rhine-Westphalia. So this would be an example how to encode this. Yes, then the next trap you fell into, or you had difficulties to understand, and I perfectly understand that, was this national designation type. I would have preferred if our editor would have said it's a category national designation type, and then there would be some registry, and you would have your national designation types written down in those registries. That's an idea we perfectly understand today. That's the year 2014, but we hadn't a clue what a registry would be way back when we modeled protected sites. So there was we had no concept of that. So this is something which we would do better. What really happened is that the editor added as an example those natural monuments. It's an example from the UK, because the editor came from the UK. And it's explained in the text saying, okay, this is the example, and you should add as an extension to that the German Naturschutzgebiete, or the, I don't know what in French, in Dutch or whatever language you have, and then add those categories. Again, we didn't have a clue of things we could do with registries, with register such categories which we now know or think is perfectly easy. So yes, I would prefer if we would update the data model in this point, getting rid of this example that is included, and adding something like you created national designation type. Perfect. I love that idea. I wrote down for myself, explain the exclusion of points. I can tell a lot of stories about that. The point was, there were some member states way back when that only gave the object geometry, the object point, how would you call it? Help me. Only a point representing a large protected site for, no, I don't name any country. And we were decided not to allow member states to just give a point without knowing where this is. And that's the reason why we excluded any other geometry from the data specification. So it's
not Cdda. This is Cdda. It's not protected sites data specification. In data specification, you can.
No, but you are correct. It's also it is recommended.
It's recommended.
Exactly.
In the data
Exactly.
inspiring specifications for protected sites.
Yeah, about this ID. Just to pick this up, from my understanding, the INSPIRE directive says that those institutions or administrations that are responsible for a data set should provide them to the network. So it's, to my mind, all the member states should provide their protected sites data on INSPIRE, and then it would be EEA harvesting all those data and creating the database, which they can call, if they want, Cdda, whatever. So, to my mind, the whole data flow must change to fit to INSPIRE, and I don't see that member states are willing to really follow this idea. They all have their own networks, like you call IONET, for example, and that's true and perfect. But if we stick to all the reporting data flows that are existing, we will never have a harmonization, and people will always ask, why do I have to do this for INSPIRE 2 in addition to what I'm used to do? So I really would like to get into people's minds that we are trying to harmonize the reporting of spatial data via INSPIRE, and this should be the right way. So please do not come up with a new ID for a protected site, because as you said, they are created at the place where people are responsible for this data. Geographical names is the next. I love this chapter because, of course, when we were discussing how we could understand what protected sites would be, we said, okay, we need a name. It had to be avoidable because there were some member states who said we have an area there, but we really don't have a name for it. Or not one single name, there are several names. They call it that, this or that. But still we said, no, we want to have something to talk about, not a number, not an ID number. So we were asking for a name. And then it was, we were obliged to take geographical names. And when we understood what that would mean for all the encoding, saying this is void because this, so you would have simply for one word or two or three words you have a really large piece of encoding. We always thought that this was not really helpful. So if we have something in the generic conceptual model as an alternative to geographical name, I would really appreciate if we would get rid of geographical name here.
This is common to all reporting issues.
Yeah. Okay. That was all I have. I think. Yeah. So these are my comments.
Thank you very much. This is extremely useful. This is what we show today is one way of interpretation and one approach. However, following this approach from the conceptual modeling down to the GML, we can fulfill everything, almost everything. But the question is this really the right way? So that's why we need bigger discussion with content people as well, that we are sure that what we provide as exchange through Inspire infrastructure still has the same meaning, the correct meaning. And we came to the same conclusion about the IUCN category, but we couldn't provide it in a different way because Inspire protected sites shows this way. Unless... In principle. No, it's... So, but yeah, let's see, maybe, as I said, we will try to be engaged more with our IONET partners, those who are actually providing the Cdda data, and to discuss the Inspire implementation with them, to present them our proposal, our solution, and to see what kind, maybe better proposals they have. At the end, the idea would be to have, to keep the harmonized reporting data flow of Cdda, and which could be, let's say, Inspire-based. What is extremely important is that it will stay harmonized. This is extremely important because we have a long history since '95 to achieve this harmonized data flow, and it has to stay harmonized. This would be my comment.
Any more comments? If not, then we will close the workshop.
Just close with the microphone also.
Yeah, okay. Then I officially, even with the microphone, close this workshop. Thank you very much for participation. I was cautiously looking at the clock because I'm German and would like to watch football now. I wish you also a very nice evening. Those of you who would like to join the, let's say, German EEA and JRC cloud, contact me. We have a point where at least the Germans will cheer for their team. Sorry for Portugal. Yeah, I guess they also have a place where they will meet. Thank you very much and have a nice evening.